The suitcase was already on the porch when she got home. She had been at the grocery store for 40 minutes. 40 minutes. She still had the receipt in her hand when she walked up the front steps and saw it sitting there. Her navy blue rolling bag, the one with the broken zipper pull she had been meaning to fix for 2 years, packed and placed outside the front door of the house she had lived in for 9 years like it was something left out for collection. The door was locked. Her key still worked. But when she pushed it open, her husband was standing in the hallway with his arms crossed and an expression she had never seen on his face before. Something between embarrassment and something colder, and he said, "I need you to go. Not we need to talk. Not something has changed. Just go." Like she was a guest who had overstayed. Like 9 years was a reservation he had finally decided to cancel. She stood in that doorway for a moment, grocery bags in both hands, receipts still between her fingers. And then she picked up the suitcase, walked back down the steps, put everything in the trunk of her car, and drove away without saying a single word. That silence was not weakness. That silence was the most controlled thing she had ever done in her life. And in exactly 72 hours, she would walk back into that man's professional world, not as his wife, not as someone who needed anything from him, but as the person his entire career now reported to. Her name was Serena Caldwell, 38 years old. She had spent the last 9 years of her life being, by almost every external measure, the supporting structure of someone else's story. Her husband, David Caldwell, was a regional vice president at a mid-sized logistics and supply chain company called Hartwell Distribution, based in Columbus, Ohio. Hartwell was not a glamorous company. It was not the kind of place that generated headlines or attracted venture capital or showed up in lists of innovative employers. It moved freight, it managed warehouse contracts, it coordinated last-mile delivery networks for retail clients across the Midwest. It was the kind of company that kept the economy running in the background while everyone paid attention to something else. David had been at Hartwell for 11 years. He had climbed steadily. He was good at his job in the specific way that people who are good at maintaining systems are good. Consistent, reliable, resistant to change, and very skilled at making sure the people above him saw his contributions clearly, while remaining strategically vague about how much of that contribution came from the person working beside him at home. Serena had a business degree and a background in operations management. She had left a full-time position at a supply chain consultancy 4 years into the marriage because David had said it would be better for their family, better for his schedule, better for the flexibility they needed if they were going to build the life they had talked about. She had believed him. She had made the adjustment. She had spent the next 5 years consulting part-time, freelancing, keeping her skills active but never at full capacity, always calibrating her ambition to fit the ceiling he had, without ever saying so directly, installed above her. She had not seen the end coming. That is the honest part of this story. She had known things were not good. She had known there was distance, the quiet kind, the kind that settles in over years and does not announce itself dramatically, but just slowly reduces everything between two people to logistics and schedules and conversations that start with whether the car needs an oil change. She had known they were not happy. She had not known he had decided, apparently sometime before that Tuesday afternoon, that the most efficient solution was to pack her bag while she was buying milk and leave it on the porch. She found out later from a mutual friend who did not know how to tell her gently and so just told her directly that there was someone else. Had been for about 8 months. A colleague. Someone in his office. Someone who, unlike Serena, was still in the room that David occupied professionally, still visible in the way he had stopped seeing his wife as visible a long time before the suitcase ever appeared on the porch. She spent the first night in a hotel that cost $87 and had a vending machine that only half worked. She spent most of that night not crying, which surprised her, and instead making a list on the Notes app of her phone of every asset, every account, every professional contact, every skill, every credential she had that was entirely her own and entirely untouched by 9 years of adjusting herself to fit someone else's blueprint. The list was longer than she expected. That surprised her too. If you are already feeling something right now, stay exactly where you are because what happens in the next 72 hours is the part of this story that nobody around Serena Caldwell saw coming. And if you are watching this channel for the first time, subscribe right now because Shadowlight Stories finds exactly this kind of story. The ones where the person everyone counted out is already 3 moves ahead, and this one is not even close to finished. Here is the piece of context that David Caldwell did not have. That mutual friend who told Serena about the colleague, that same friend, completely separately, worked in the HR department of a private equity group called Meridian Capital Partners, based in Cincinnati. Meridian had been quietly finalizing the acquisition of Hartwell Distribution for the better part of 6 months. The deal had not been announced publicly. The internal transition team had been assembled. And Meridian, as part of their standard post-acquisition restructuring process, had been conducting a search for a new head of operations to come in and modernize the company's systems, which their due diligence team had identified as significantly outdated and inefficient. The search had been conducted through a boutique executive placement firm. It had been confidential. And 3 weeks before Serena's suitcase appeared on the front porch, that placement firm had sent Meridian a short list of 4 candidates. Serena Caldwell's name was on that list. She had submitted her materials 8 weeks earlier, almost on a quiet impulse, because the placement firm had reached out to her through her consulting network, and the role had matched her background so precisely that not applying had felt almost dishonest. She had not told David, not because she was hiding it, but because they were at the stage in a marriage where you stop narrating your interior life out loud because you have stopped believing anyone is genuinely listening. She had submitted. She had done a first-round interview by video. She had done a second one in person in Cincinnati, telling David she was visiting a college friend, which was almost true because the college friend existed and lived in Cincinnati and had joined her for dinner after the interview. She had come home that evening and made pasta, and David had talked about a problem with one of his warehouse contracts, and she had listened and thought about nothing except whether she had answered the final question well enough. She found out she had answered it well enough the morning after she spent the night in the $87 hotel. Her phone rang at 8:43 in the morning. It was the placement firm. Meridian Capital Partners wanted to offer her the position of Chief Operations Officer of Hartwell Distribution, effective upon the close of the acquisition, which was scheduled to finalize in 4 business days. She sat on the edge of the hotel bed in yesterday's clothes, and she said yes. She said it calmly. She said it the way you say yes to something you have been building toward without fully knowing it, the way the word feels less like a decision and more like an arrival. Picture what the next 72 hours looked like from the outside. Serena is staying in a hotel. Her marriage has just ended in the most abrupt and undignified way possible. She has a suitcase with a broken zipper pull and a grocery receipt still somewhere in her coat pocket. And she is also, quietly, becoming the boss of the company where her husband has spent 11 years building a career he believed was his alone to manage. She did not call David. She did not call anyone who would tell David. She called her attorney, who she had the number for already because she was, as she had always been, the kind of person who thought practically even when the ground was moving. She called her sister. She found a short-term furnished apartment and signed a month-to-month lease online. And she went through the next 4 days the way she had gone through most of the hard things in her marriage, alone, steady, and without the luxury of falling apart before the work was done. The acquisition closed on a Friday. The internal announcement went out company-wide that same afternoon. New ownership, new leadership structure, new chief operations officer, effective immediately, name, title, photograph. David Caldwell read the email in his office at 4:17 in the afternoon. His assistant, who had been at Hartwell for 6 years and had met Serena at 3 different company events, later said that she watched him read it and watched the color leave his face so completely and so quickly that she had briefly considered whether she should call someone. He called Serena. She let it go to voicemail. This is the part of the story that the people who tell stories about power and reversal always want to make into a confrontation. The dramatic moment, the face-to-face, the line that gets delivered perfectly in a conference room. And the reason Shadowlight Stories tells this one differently is because the truth of it is quieter and more interesting than that. The first time Serena and David were in the same room after the acquisition was a mandatory all-staff leadership meeting 2 weeks later. She ran the meeting. He sat in it. She did not address him differently from anyone else. She did not look at him longer than the role required. She was precise, she was prepared, and she was the kind of presence in a room that makes people sit up slightly straighter without understanding why. Afterward, he waited by the door as people filtered out, and when the room had mostly cleared, he said her name. She turned. He started to say something. She said, "This is a professional environment, David. Anything you need to communicate goes through the standard channels." And she walked out. Not because she was performing composure, but because she was done performing anything at all. There is a layer to this story that is not about David at all, and it is the layer that matters most. Serena Caldwell had spent 4 years contracting herself to fit a life that someone else was designing. She had made herself smaller in real time, consistently, in ways she had rationalized as choice when they were actually accommodation. And she had still, in those 4 years, kept enough of herself intact, her credentials, her contacts, her willingness to apply for a role because it matched her background even when her husband did not know she was doing it, that when the floor disappeared, there was already something solid underneath. That is not luck. That is what happens when a person never fully stops being themselves, even while they are becoming someone's supporting structure. The question I want to leave in the comments is this, and I want your honest answer. Have you ever made yourself smaller in a relationship, professionally, personally, in any way? And if so, what was the moment you realized you had done it? Not who caused it. Just the moment you saw it clearly for yourself. If you know someone right now who is in the middle of a version of this, someone who gave a lot to something that stopped giving back, someone who is quietly rebuilding in a hotel room or a borrowed couch or a studio apartment with boxes still unpacked, share this with them today. Not because it will fix anything, but because sometimes the most powerful thing you can hand someone is evidence that the floor they cannot see yet is already there. The moment they underestimate you is the moment your next chapter begins.